I'm Chance Dorland, and this is The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio and Bexar County from ExpressNews.com. A San Antonio woman is currently on trial, accused of murder and the death of her boyfriend in 2017 after the pair had an argument. Details from the proceedings, which started this week, have revealed that she actually confessed to the crime and told police she thought the man was being a, quote, jerk. Liz, we're back with another episode of our weekly discussion of law and crime, and this case comes from 2017. So we have some background on this that's been gathered over the last 2 years. What do you know?
Yes, Chance. This case involves a woman by the name of Laura Flores Messick. She was arrested and charged 2 years ago with killing Chasen Montes de Oca on June 10th, 2017. And they had been dating and they had started living together just, a few months before this tragic event happened. And testimony that began this week has established that the man had been talking with his mother on the phone prior to this incident. And suddenly he stopped answering his phone when she was calling him to check up on him. And he had been calling her apparently while the two had been, involved in an argument that, seems to have progressed and kind of heated up. So after some hours passed, de Oca's mother called authorities, for a welfare check. And she actually arrived first. And she found her son lying face down in a pool of his own blood. He had been shot through the heart. Actually, the bullet hit his hand and went right through his heart. And Messick told police that she didn't know, and when she was arrested, after they had interviewed her, during this interview, she told police that she didn't know if he was dead. So she took a knife and cut his neck to see whether he was still alive.
Liz, I got to tell you, we've discussed a lot of cases here on the Docket podcast. That detail that you just told me about, that really sticks out. I'm interested to know what else you've learned from testimony in a case where apparently the accused murderer says that, she slit the neck of her boyfriend to see if he was still alive.
Yeah, this you learn more about obviously a defendant in a trial, but and also you learn about the victims who are no longer with us, and from opening statements, we learned this week that Chasen Montes de Oca was 40 years old. He had been in the Army. He was a decorated Iraq War veteran. He had at least, 3 medals that were mentioned during the opening statements in court this week. We also learned that he had been married before and he was a father. We learned that there were jealousy issues involving Chasen de Oca's ex-wife, jealousy on the part of the accused in this case. And days before this incident happened, Chasen de Oca had been jailed on a custody or a child support issue. And he was bailed out by either one or both of these women. So in the interview that was conducted between, by police with Laura Messick, prosecutors told the jury that they would see how she described calmly during this interview how the two of them had been arguing. And she had said that de Oca brought out a gun. And when he put it down, she picked it up and pointed it at him. The prosecutor told the panel that de Oca told Messick she wouldn't do it. Basically, he taunted her. But the woman said she shot him from the bathroom while he was in the hallway. And again, the way this appears to have happened, because we saw some of the crime scene investigation video and photographs of the crime scene. Saw how he was definitely lying face down in blood that had been spread through the hallway, and there was spatter on the walls. The bullet went right through the heart, and again, he was cut in the neck with a knife. And prosecutors said that there was about a liter of blood in the man's body cavity. So, meanwhile, the defense, there's always two sides to a story. The defense portrayed Jason de Oca as, of course, recognizing the fact that he's a veteran, he's decorated, he was a father, all of the good things about him, and acknowledging the fact that he was a father, portrayed de Oca also as controlling. Again, there was jealousy issues in their relationship that involved exes. And the defense attorney said that Jason de Oca possibly could also have had PTSD from his deployment. So, maybe trying to establish to the jury that, there might have been some anger issues on his part as well. The defense attorney also used the word self-defense and asked the jury, basically, what would you do if someone pulled out a gun and you felt threatened?
I think we'll get back to that, Liz, but let's talk about something else regarding this current ongoing case. As more and more police officers around the country are starting to wear body cameras, this evidence is showing up in trials, and that's the case here. There's actually some body camera video that captured when this mother found her son lying in a pool of his own blood.
Yes, Chance, this was really it was just awful. It was tragic. The first witness to testify was basically the San Antonio police officer who was the first to arrive at the scene. And from his body-worn camera, you could see as he arrived, you could see him in the car, you could see him pull up to the house. And once he pulled up to the house, you could see, you could see Rachel Paniagua, who is Jason de Oca's mother, just beside herself, and you could hear her anguished cries. She, again, had been talking to her son, and actually she had also been talking to Laura Messick that day. And while the courtroom is riveted and we're watching this video of this poor mother, just could not believe her eyes that she was actually seeing, her son on the ground and dead. She told them that she had spoken to Laura Messick that day and knew that they had been arguing. And she actually, Laura Messick, in her own video had said she called her boyfriend's mother that day. But at that moment, when Rachel Paniagua is doing two things, she is trying to tell the police officer everything that she knows about what she found when she got there. And then also just in complete grief, she told them that she told Laura Messick to leave her son alone and to leave the house. And, to say that the courtroom was completely silent and riveted watching her is really what happened. It was just quite something to see.
Now, Elizabeth, let's jump back to something I mentioned at the top of today's episode. This report of what Messick said to police about the man that she admits to have killed. And this was on the record.
Yes, this a detective testified also. Detective Rachel Barnes from San Antonio Police Department. And during the interview at police headquarters, I think we've talked about this before on the docket, that whenever, we watch these videos in court, one of the questions that the defense will usually ask, or sometimes prosecutors will ask it before they do, is did the person know that they were being videotaped? And what the generic answer is, and everybody says it, and I've seen it myself going to police headquarters at times, there are so many signs that say, you're being videotaped, or just warning you that you could be videotaped. So, these days you just automatically assume. So we are watching this video, and during the conversation between the detective and Laura Messick, the detective asked her, what led up to this, and a lot of the questioning, that the prosecutors were getting to when they were questioning her was, did she ever talk about being afraid, or she feared for her life, or basically going toward this thought about a self-defense issue. And the detective said, she never really said any of that. And as we kept watching the video, the detective asked Laura Messick what she was thinking when this whole shooting happened, when it went down, and also asked her, about the stabbing. And at that point, Laura Messick is seen on the video, she looked pretty calm. Sometimes people will just really have an emotional experience. Sometimes people will be, defiant. She was just pretty calm, and she told the detective that after the shooting that she didn't know if he was dead. So she used a kitchen knife to cut him. And she said, she was thinking at the time, there's an expletive in there, and what a jerk.
So, as we mentioned earlier, there is the idea of self-defense at play with this trial here, Liz. So, that being the case, I'm wondering how long this whole thing might last, because does that mean they're going to try to bring in some expert testimony, talk more about maybe the victim's military record? What do you think is in store for the rest of this trial?
Well, the state is still presenting witnesses, so we'll probably see. We'll probably hear from the medical examiner, from gunshot, about gunshot residue tests, whether they were conducted and what the findings were, and I'm sure that there is probably going to be some more discussion, or rather more testimony about whether or not this was a self-defense situation. Because as I mentioned earlier, that when the detective was talking to the defendant on the video, she seemed very calm and never really seemed to say the words, I was afraid that he was going to shoot me, or I was in fear, that I would be killed, or any of that. And I think we've discussed it some on the podcast that, when there is a definite, they will point out, they being prosecutors and defense attorneys will point out, what self-defense is, and to give the jury something to go by, and to go by the statute to, make their determination. So, this trial began Wednesday in the 175th State District Court with Judge Catherine Torres Stahl presiding. So, because the state said they have multiple witnesses to present, maybe we will hear some of that, or something about his time in Iraq in the military, and whether or not there was a situation that caused him to be treated or something for post-traumatic stress disorder, or if there's anything in relation to that. We will probably hear about that. And if convicted, Laura Flores Messick has decided to go directly to Judge Torresdal for sentencing. So murder is a first-degree felony. It's punishable by 5 to 99 years in prison. And so with Judge Torresdal sentencing her, what we'll probably see is she'll have a pre-sentencing investigation hearing where both sides will call witnesses to talk about Messick, possibly her prior criminal history, which includes driving while intoxicated with child under 15 in the car, DWI with a blood alcohol content of 0.15 or higher, which in the state of Texas, somebody is drunk if they have a blood alcohol content of 0.8. So, there's a lot to be seen in that sentencing.
Now, something like that, could that have an effect on sentencing, or might these be looked at differently as one is a very different crime than another?
Well, all of these cases, or these other cases that I mentioned, are also pending before the same judge in the same court. So, in my experience, I've only been covering the courthouse for 3 years, but in watching some of these sentencing hearings, when there's a plea deal, or in this case where if someone goes through the first phase and there is a conviction and they've decided they want to go to the judge, the judge will have a hearing and listen to both sides. So the prosecutors will put on witnesses to talk about, they could talk about Messick's criminal past. Prosecutors will usually want to go for the highest sentence they can get. In this case, again, life in prison, which is essentially, 60 years maybe. The defense also could put on their own witnesses to talk about why she doesn't deserve that, the maximum sentence. And, other factors, because she also has children. And sometimes, they will, the defense will point that out that, if someone has young children, try to, keep that in mind, or, that even though she does have some DWI in her past, they could talk about, they could still mention that, but they could still kind of plead with the judge to show, maybe some mercy on that. But the judge will look at what both sides say and will review the recommendation of the prosecutors. Again, listen to what the defense says, but in the end, she'll impose, the sentence herself.
And then wrapping things up here, Liz, it sounds like as this case only began a few days ago, we'll probably be talking about this again on the podcast.
Yes, it did start a few days ago, but it seems like there are going to be a lot of witnesses in this case, a lot of things to talk about. So we may be talking about this as soon as the next time. So as always, stay tuned.
And thank you to San Antonio Express News courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala for joining me for today's episode of The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio and Bexar County from expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.